Grindhouse trailers were designed to do one thing: grab your money before you realized what you were actually watching. They promised blood, chaos, forbidden thrills, and unforgettable nightmares. But once you sat down with your popcorn, many of these so-called shockers delivered nothing more than padding, cheap sets, and long stretches of people just talking. So, which trailers lied the worst? Let's peel back the Grindhouse curtain and expose the outrageous promises versus the boring reality. Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS, 1975. Few trailers in Grindhouse history have screamed louder than Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS. The ads promised the ultimate forbidden film. You'd see a sadistic commandant running a Nazi camp, indulging in unspeakable punishments and wild experiments that would scar you for life. The trailer even warned audiences that the shocking violence was too real, too raw, too extreme for ordinary theaters. But here's the catch. While the movie had plenty of provocative imagery, most of it was recycled, tame by exploitation standards, or played out in repetitive ways. What looked like shocking experiments in the trailer turned out to be the same set of scenes, shuffled and reused. Instead of relentless horror, you got a surprisingly sluggish story that leaned on shock value without delivering actual suspense. Even critics who were used to exploitation fare called it flat. Word spread quickly that the trailer was the best thing about the film. The promises of non-stop cruelty and shocking originality oversold. The reality was padded storylines, a few scenes of over-the-top violence, and long stretches of dullness. That's the Grindhouse trick in a nutshell. Sell you something too extreme for words, then hand you a watered-down product. The trailer may have shouted, "Banned in 46 countries," but the only real crime was how much it overhyped itself. Mark of the Witch, 1970. The trailer for Mark of the Witch played like a direct line to the devil himself. Audiences were promised a shocking story of satanic possession, forbidden rituals, and scenes that would leave the viewer trembling in terror. The tagline insisted you'd witness things no human eye should ever see. That's about as heavy as a trailer can go. But once the lights went down, the supposed occult nightmare turned out to be little more than a slow-moving student film. Most of the shocking action scenes teased in the ads were actually brief glimpses that barely appeared in the final movie. Instead of chaos and ritual mayhem, you got endless dialogue, amateur acting, and a supernatural plot that moved like molasses. In reality, the possession angle wasn't nearly as wild as the marketing made it sound. The effects were bare bones, the rituals laughably staged, and the atmosphere far closer to a college theater project than a Grindhouse shocker. Anyone who bought a ticket expecting a demonic roller coaster quickly realized they had been sold a ghost town of a story. This wasn't uncommon in the era. Trailers often took 2 or 3 brief, spicy shots, blew them up into full-on promises, and cut them to look like the entire movie was packed with them. But with Mark of the Witch, the lie was just too big to ignore. The hype said unholy terror. The film delivered awkward classroom drama with a few sparks of occult flair. A major bait and switch. Blood Feast, 1963. Here's the film often called the godfather of gore, Blood Feast. The trailer wasn't just a marketing tool, it was a dare. Audiences were warned to bring barf bags. They were told that this movie was so gruesome, so unbearably violent, that it might actually be banned mid-screening. The ads painted Blood Feast as the most extreme horror event in cinema history. Now let's break down what actually happened. Director Herschel Gordon Lewis definitely showed gore on screen, which in 1963 was unusual. But the film itself, it was stiffly acted, clumsily shot, and about as convincing as a high school play. Most of the unbearable violence looked like ketchup and rubber parts. What the trailer had hyped as dangerous and forbidden ended up coming across as more campy than shocking. That doesn't mean it didn't make money. On the contrary, the outrageous marketing worked. Audiences showed up in droves, expecting to faint in the aisles. What they got instead was a strange combination of accidental comedy and cheap thrills. The barf bags became collector's items, not necessities. The gap between promise and delivery was huge. But in a funny twist, it ended up helping the film's reputation. People who left disappointed at least remembered the hype, and in the world of Grindhouse, that was often enough to keep a movie alive for decades. Blood Feast may have promised the world's most dangerous film and delivered campy splatter, but it also proved that sometimes a trailer lie can turn into a cult legend. The Thing with Two Heads, 1972. Now this is one of the most bizarre Grindhouse setups ever. The trailer for The Thing with Two Heads promised a mind-blowing mix of horror and comedy. Imagine it, a racist white surgeon's head transplanted onto the body of a black convict. The preview sold it like the wildest, most chaotic ride in movie history. You'd see a freakish monster causing havoc, car chases, and non-stop action. And yes, the premise is wild, but here's the truth. The trailer gave you all the best parts. The actual film was padded with endless driving sequences and dull filler that slowed the pace to a crawl. Instead of non-stop outrageous mayhem, you got a repetitive chase movie that ran out of ideas after the first 30 minutes. The real frustration was that the potential was there. A story this insane could have been non-stop Grindhouse gold. Instead, the filmmakers stretched a thin premise to feature length by repeating the same chase gags again and again. The humor never hit as hard as the trailer suggested, and the horror element barely existed. In other words, the trailer gave you a 5-star meal of absurdity, but the film served you reheated leftovers. Fans who came for a monster movie left with what felt like an extended car chase, stitched together with occasional comedy. Proof that Grindhouse trailers knew how to sell an idea, even if the filmmakers didn't know how to sustain it. I Drink Your Blood, 1970. Few Grindhouse trailers packed a punch like I Drink Your Blood. The preview teased a story of rabid hippies infected with actual animal blood, turning into uncontrollable maniacs who would terrorize a small town. No one under 17 admitted, the trailer screamed, adding to the myth that this was pure cinematic danger. The clips promised frenzied attacks, shocking gore, and chaos on a scale audiences had never seen. And sure, the movie had moments of Grindhouse energy. But once again, the trailer was selling fireworks, where the movie mostly delivered sparklers. The first attack scenes are wild, but after that, the film quickly falls into repetition. Hippies storming a house, hippies running through the woods, hippies drooling and attacking strangers. It became more of the same over and over, losing steam fast. The movie padded its runtime with drawn-out sequences, and much of the gore that seemed outrageous in the trailer was actually pretty tame once seen in context. Instead of full-tilt chaos, audiences got a middling exploitation flick that didn't live up to the danger it promised. The trailer had practically dared audiences to test their limits, but what they actually sat through was far less dangerous and far more predictable. A clever Grindhouse trick: create a trailer that feels like a roller coaster ride, then deliver a merry-go-round instead. Cannibal Girls, 1973. If you watch the trailer for Cannibal Girls, you'd think you were about to witness the wildest flesh-eating nightmare of the decade. It promised women luring men into their lair, devouring them alive, and bathing in shocking gore. The marketing even included a gimmick: theaters installed buzzers that would warn squeamish audiences just before the sickening scenes. That's one way to get butts in seats. The truth: the movie was a shaggy, awkward black comedy that relied on improvisation more than real structure. Sure, there were a handful of bloody moments, but the trailer made it seem like wall-to-wall carnage. In reality, most of the runtime is spent watching characters wander, flirt, and talk in meandering scenes that feel more like improv theater than a Grindhouse gore fest. The flesh-eating hook, barely sprinkled in. The buzzer gimmick was more effective at making audiences laugh than gag. And while the film has since gained curiosity status because it was directed by Ivan Reitman before Ghostbusters, in its original release it left many viewers feeling duped. The trailer overpromised on horror and shock, but what it really sold was hype. Instead of a relentless cannibal nightmare, audiences got a half-funny, half-clumsy experiment in horror comedy. Classic case of the ad department working harder than the filmmakers.
The Toolbox Murders, 1978. When the trailer for the Toolbox Murders hit theaters, audiences thought they were in for one of the most violent, shocking grindhouse slashers ever made. The preview promised a masked man roaming an apartment complex with drills, screwdrivers, and hammers, slaughtering women in the most outrageous ways possible. The marketing leaned hard into its based on a true story angle, giving it a sinister edge that suggested raw reality rather than scripted exploitation. But once you sat down, the truth unraveled fast. Yes, the movie opened with a barrage of brutal killings, and those were exactly the scenes splashed all over the trailer. But after that, the so-called non-stop massacre gave way to a surprisingly slow, melodramatic detective story that dragged on and on. The trailer had made it look like 2 hours of pure mayhem. In reality, the first 20 minutes were the mayhem, and the rest was long, tedious filler. The true story hook? Pure marketing spin. There was no basis, in fact, but the ad campaign leaned into that idea to make it seem more dangerous and scandalous. For audiences lured in by the outrageous ads, the disappointment was real. They expected a savage grindhouse nightmare, but got half a slasher and half a flat police procedural. That's the bait and switch in action. Sell chaos, deliver padding. The Toolbox Murders trailer is still remembered as one of the most shocking of its time. The film itself? A lopsided oddity that couldn't possibly live up to its own sales pitch.
The Corpse Grinders, 1971. Now here's a title designed to hook you immediately. The Corpse Grinders trailer promised pure madness, a cheap pet food company secretly grinding human bodies into cat food, unleashing a wave of flesh-craving cats that would attack their owners. Sounds like a grindhouse classic waiting to happen, right? Except the movie delivered almost none of that insanity. The trailer teased cats lunging at throats, people screaming as feline terror spread, and shocking revelations about human meat in every can. But the finished film? Long stretches of people standing around in a factory, talking about money. The killer cats were often just regular house cats, being tossed onto actors who pretended to be mauled. And the human meat subplot, while technically present, was treated more like background dressing than the wild spectacle promised. Even fans of schlock were left disappointed. They came expecting mayhem, and instead got a lethargic, poorly shot grindhouse dud. The whole thing felt like the filmmakers had a great poster and a killer trailer idea, but not enough money, talent, or energy to back it up. The Corpse Grinders is remembered today mostly for its outrageous title, not its actual content. Proof that sometimes the trailer can be 10 times scarier and funnier than the film itself. Angels, Wild Women, 1972. When audiences saw the trailer for Angels, Wild Women, they were promised a biker movie like no other. This wasn't just another gang on motorcycles. It was an army of Amazon-like women tearing through towns, wrecking men, and unleashing pure chaos. The ad campaign made it sound like the perfect blend of biker mayhem and female fury. So, what did viewers actually get? A mess. The film was mostly a patch job cobbled together from an earlier biker flick, with reshoots tossed in to capitalize on the wild women craze. The trailer highlighted the reshoot footage. Women with weapons, explosive fights, outrageous stunts. But those moments barely appear in the finished movie. The majority of the runtime is a dull, standard biker gang story padded with filler. It's the classic grindhouse bait and switch. The most outrageous scenes you saw in the ad? They were basically the entire reshoot package. And once those quick bursts were over, the audience had to sit through a confusing, recycled story that didn't even match the energy of the trailer. The result? Disappointment, frustration, and a film that has since gained a reputation not for delivering what was promised, but for being one of the boldest examples of grindhouse false advertising. The women in the title were wild, but only for a few minutes of screen time. Blood Orgy of the She-Devils, 1973. No grindhouse trailer list would be complete without a title like Blood Orgy of the She-Devils. The preview teased everything the genre was known for: occult sacrifices, black masses, women in trances, and a wave of shocking ritual mayhem. It was marketed as the ultimate forbidden occult movie, dangerous, terrifying, and unforgettable. The movie itself, a talkfest. Nearly all the wild moments teased in the trailer boiled down to a handful of brief shots reused over and over. The supposed orgies? Barely there. The demonic rituals? Awkward, slow, and laughably staged. The gore? Minimal. Instead, the film dragged viewers through endless dialogue about witches, curses, and reincarnation, without delivering any of the chaos the ads had promised. This is where Grindhouse marketing really shines. Or rather, really lies. The distributors knew they didn't have a wild enough movie to sell, so they built a trailer around suggestion. Quick flashes of cloaked figures, women screaming, fire, and drums created the illusion of non-stop ritual madness. But once the audience sat down, they were trapped in what felt like a lecture on the occult. Today, the film is remembered as one of director Ted V. Michaels' weakest efforts. But the trailer? That thing still slaps. It remains a masterclass in how to take almost nothing and spin it into something irresistible. Unfortunately, audiences who fell for it discovered there was almost nothing under the smoke and mirrors. Grave of the Vampire, 1972. The trailer for Grave of the Vampire made a bold promise. This was a film too terrifying to endure. The ad leaned hard into its lurid setup, a vampire rising from the grave, committing horrific deeds, and fathering a child destined to hunt him down. It was cut like the Grindhouse event of the year, a brutal fusion of blood-sucking horror and family drama twisted beyond recognition. But the movie itself was a far cry from what the ads screamed. The opening sequence, where the vampire attacks a young couple, is shocking enough to draw you in. But after that, the film grinds to a halt, settling into long stretches of melodrama and endless conversations. The vampire's rampage? Limited. The shocking, terrifying images promised in the trailer? Mostly absent after the opening. What viewers really got was a story with an intriguing premise, but little energy. The trailer packed all the action into 2 minutes, creating the illusion of a relentless horror nightmare. But once you sat down, the energy fizzled. It felt less like a Grindhouse eruption and more like a TV drama padded with occasional bursts of horror. The lie here wasn't in the story. The idea is strong, but in the pacing, audiences expected mayhem, but got slow burn melodrama with a handful of effective scenes. The trailer was the thrill ride. The movie was the nap afterwards. Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, 1976. Blaxploitation met horror in the trailer for Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, and the marketing pulled no punches. The ads sold it as an urban monster rampage. A respected doctor transforms into a monstrous figure and terrorizes the streets of Los Angeles. The preview promised violence, chaos, and social commentary wrapped in pure Grindhouse spectacle. The concept was gold. The trailer showcased scenes of a monster tearing through back alleys, police in hot pursuit, and city dwellers screaming in terror. It played like a Frankenstein story injected with 70s grit. But what audiences actually got was a slower-paced drama that occasionally dipped into monster territory. Instead of a non-stop rampage, the film dragged viewers through long stretches of social commentary and clunky subplots. The monster action was spaced out and often underwhelming, leaving audiences waiting far too long between bursts of excitement. The trailer had crammed all those monster shots together, giving the impression of constant horror. In reality, you had to sit through a lot of filler to get to the good stuff. It wasn't a terrible film by any means. It had ambition, and some of its ideas were ahead of their time, but the promise of a Grindhouse monster brawl wasn't met. The trailer was the brawl. The movie was more like a lecture sprinkled with a few moments of mayhem. Blood Freak, 1972. If Grindhouse was built on outrageous advertising, Blood Freak might take the crown for the boldest lie. The trailer sold it as the world's only turkey-headed monster anti-drug movie. It promised insanity. A drifter eats drug-laced turkey meat, mutates into a giant turkey-headed monster and goes on a rampage. The ads teased pure madness, a grindhouse fever dream that would blow minds. And yes, the movie delivers a man in a giant turkey head. But here's the trick. The trailer never mentioned how painfully slow and preachy the rest of the film would be. Instead of a chaotic monster fest, most of the runtime is bogged down by heavy-handed speeches, endless filler scenes, and long stretches where nothing happens. The actual turkey monster rampage is short and clumsy, padded with repetitive attacks that barely register as horror. The ads promise the most bizarre horror experience imaginable, but what audiences got was an anti-drug lecture awkwardly wrapped in turkey feathers. Even the monster sequences, while absurd, felt like afterthoughts compared to the mountains of dialogue. In the end, the outrageous trailer was a work of genius. It distilled the film's only wild elements into a package so bizarre that you had to see it for yourself. But when you did, you realized that the turkey-headed monster was just a brief garnish on top of a very slow, very preachy grindhouse platter. This is grindhouse false advertising at its finest. Take 2 minutes of wild footage, build an insane trailer, and trick audiences into thinking they were about to see the strangest movie ever made. The lie worked until the lights came up. Grindhouse trailers were masters of deception. They screamed about horrors you'd never see, promised chaos that never came, and sometimes sold entire movies based on 2 minutes of usable footage. But maybe that's why they're still so fascinating. They were wild sales pitches, disguised as cinema. So, which Grindhouse trailer do you think lied the worst? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe for more hidden film history, and remember, sometimes the best part of the movie was the trailer.